This is, will the secretary call the roll? This is a reconvening of case SU 2103.
I apologize. Here I am.
Facade. We're just doing the roll call now. Brian Bangert. Here. Michael Kurtz. Michael Kurtz, I just called your name. I know you're there.
Hey, Ruth, you need to mute.
I'm here.
Rick Dean.
Here.
Julia Turner.
Here,
Jim Finnegan.
Here.
Drake Zimmerman.
Here.
Ruth Novosad.
Here.
We have a quorum so we can conduct business. And I think we stopped, Phil has something he's gonna read first.
If the case heard tonight is finished and the ZBA has discussed it and voted on it, the case will be considered complete. If a case is not finished, or if the go-to-meeting system crashes or the ZBA members are not able to adequately communicate before a vote is taken on a case by the ZBA, the case will be continued until 7 p.m. on July 6, 2021. Please contact the Department of Building and Zoning at 309-888-5160 for a link to this meeting or attend the meeting here in person. The ZBA bylaws allow the chair to impose time limits on closing statements and limits them to 3 minutes. A copy of the rules and procedures of the ZBA can be found on the website at the Department of Building and Zoning or here on the table by the door. A note for those watching via YouTube live stream: the YouTube stream is not an interactive medium. Any comments on the YouTube live stream are not monitored and will not be addressed in the meeting. If you are attending remotely, please mute your phones or computers and turn your cameras off unless you are on the ZBA or you are approved to speak.
Well, at this time, if the applicant wants to, he can do rebuttal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jim Griffin on behalf of the applicant. We are not going to present any rebuttal testimony.
Okay. So at this time, if you want to make a closing statement, you can go ahead.
Thank you. Can I confirm first, my closing statement will be longer than 3 minutes. I don't think it'll be longer than 10 minutes, but I think as the applicant, we should be allotted that additional time.
So noted. We talked about it last night.
Well, thank you, members of the Zoning Board of Appeals. Appreciate all the time and careful attention that you take in these matters. It's greatly appreciated. I want to thank Mr. Dick, Mr. Mitchell, Ms. Vasquez for their efforts here also in processing our application. As I stated at the beginning of these hearings, the application materials and the testimony that you've now heard demonstrates that this project meets all of the standards for a special use under your zoning ordinance. I'm going to review the major aspects of this project for compliance with those standards, and I think you'll agree that we have satisfied those. The proposed turbines for the project are Vestas 3.6 megawatt and Vestas 4.2 megawatt turbines. These meet the county requirements for size and safety and have been certified by recognized international testing agencies, and that information is provided in the application and conforms to your ordinance requirements. The noise model for this project included in the application confirms that the noise output will satisfy and indeed be substantially under the limits set forth in the county zoning ordinance. Mr. Hankard testified that he has, on numerous occasions, confirmed in the field with actual noise measurements that his predictive models are accurate. Mr. Hankard testified that his recent measurements from the Blooming Grove project were consistent with and were less than predicted by the model that he prepared for the Blooming Grove project. This project is taking advantage of new turbine technology, including larger but slower rotating turbine blades, which create less noise, with serrated edge blades on the turbines, which also create less noise, and the ability to use fewer turbines but still produce the same electrical output, all of which combine to decrease the noise output for this project and other impacts that occur for wind energy projects. This project was also designed to meet a voluntary annual shadow flicker limit of 30 hours per year on non-participating residents. Now, the actual amount of shadow flicker will be less because the modeled 89 turbine locations, while per our application only 64 turbines will be installed. The model also assumed that there's no vegetation in between the wind energy turbines and the residences. And so, in actuality, the shadow flicker that will occur will be less than the model predicts. Now, the McLean County Board, with its extensive and lengthy experience with wind energy projects, has not imposed a shadow flicker limit on projects, and indeed not even required a shadow flicker model as part of an application for a special use permit for a wind project. But of those jurisdictions that have adopted shadow flicker limits, 30 hours is by far the most common. Accordingly, Sapphire Sky believes that its voluntary commitment on shadow flicker to 30 hours annually for non-participating residences is appropriate, is reasonable, is in line with projects previously approved in McLean County, and is in line with typical standards imposed in Illinois and in the entire United States. Concerning aviation safety, the Sapphire Sky project obtained all necessary DNHs, determinations of no hazard, from the Federal Aviation Administration. And the project is cited to avoid impacts to private airstrips. The studies on communication that are included in the project demonstrate that this project will not have a negative impact on telecommunication in the project area. The project has been reviewed by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and by the Illinois Department of Natural Resources. The Illinois Department of Natural Resources submitted correspondence to the county which recommended certain conditions be imposed on the project if approved. And Sapphire Sky has confirmed in its application and through its testimony here that it will implement those conditions as part of the project. The decommissioning plan and the estimate is in accordance with the requirements of the county zoning ordinance and with the agricultural impact mitigation agreement, which has been entered into by the project with the Department of Agriculture and which is part of the application. Sapphire Sky will post cash in a county escrow account in accordance with the requirements of the county decommissioning ordinances and in accordance with the schedule provided in the Agricultural Impact Mitigation Agreement. Those funds will be available in cash to the county to assure decommissioning of this project at the end of its life. Accordingly, the project is in compliance with the county zoning ordinance standards. Now, during the hearing, testimony was heard by the ZBA concerning construction issues, road use agreements, and responsiveness to complaints during construction. The county zoning ordinance application requirements, of course, do not require a road use agreement to be submitted as part of the zoning application. However, the proposed conditions that have been imposed on past projects and that have been recommended by Mr. Dick in his staff report do require that the applicant obtain a road use agreement with the county and with the affected townships before construction can begin. And certainly Sapphire Sky will comply with those conditions if imposed on this project. Now, these issues such as dust control and other construction issues are well known by the county staff and the county engineer, Mr. Jerry Stokes. He is well informed about those complaints that occurred during the construction of previous projects in the county. And those issues, such as dust control, are being addressed in the road use agreement that Mr. Stokes, with the assistance of the state's attorney's office, is currently negotiating with the Invenergy team. The appropriate county officials are reviewing and negotiating this road use agreement. The county engineer, who has expertise in road construction and road safety and bidding and performing road projects, with the assistance of the state's attorney's office, is leading that discussion. That agreement, under the typical process here in this county, is then presented to the County Transportation Committee and then to the full board. So there's many stages of review of that road use agreement. Concerning responsiveness to complaints, as Mr. Vanderkamp testified during his testimony, Sapphire Sky is willing to create a complaint and information hotline number and to publicize this. I have a proposed condition that I'm going to read to you into the record for the zoning board's consideration during your deliberations. And this condition language is the following. Prior to the commencement of construction of the project and during the entire operating life of the project owner-operator shall establish a telephone number hotline for the general public to call with any complaints or questions. The hotline number shall be publicized in order to ensure that the general public is aware of the hotline number. The hotline number shall be conspicuously posted at the project site and at the project owner-operator's office in the county. Each call shall be logged by the project owner-operator, and such log shall identify the name, address, and reason for the call. The project owner-operator shall provide the designated county representative with the call log on a monthly basis and upon reasonable request, to the extent allowed by law, and the project owner-operator shall retain copies of the log for a minimum of 2 years. The project owner-operator shall respond to all complaints within a reasonable time not to exceed 72 hours, and shall take necessary action to resolve all objectively verified complaints. During the construction of the project owner-operator shall maintain updated contact information on file with the designated county representative for addressing complaints related to construction activities. The project owner-operator shall designate a contact person who will respond to inquiries from the designated county representative. Once the project has reached commercial operation, following the conclusion of construction activities, the project owner-operator shall maintain permanent contact information with the designated county representative, including a designated representative of the project owner-operator, along with a phone number and email address, and a 24-hour emergency contact phone number. And I do have a written copy of that, which if the zoning board chair desires, I can provide it for your deliberations. And so that's a condition that we would propose for this project to assure that complaints are promptly responded to, which they should be. So in addition to meeting all the criteria under the zoning ordinance, the record demonstrates that the local community surrounding and within this project is supportive and excited about the opportunities presented by this project. This project has the participation of 59 landowners owning over 14,000 acres. The Leroy and Blue Ridge School Districts both submitted resolutions in support of this project, and the Leroy School District Superintendent testified here in support of the project. The village of Bellflower, which is the closest municipality to this project, has executed a turbine siting agreement with the project, and that has been submitted to you in the special use application. This agreement will provide substantial benefits to the village of Bellflower during the life of this project. This project represents an outstanding opportunity for this particular area of McLean County, which currently does not have any wind energy projects, to benefit from wind energy and the opportunities that arise from wind energy projects. Mr. Loomis, in detail, went over those potential opportunities that this community will have and the county will have from this wind energy project. So for the reasons detailed in the special use application, and as stated in Mr. Dick's staff report to you, which found that the project met all the special use criteria, we agree that this project meets all of the county standards for a special use. Accordingly, members of the zoning board, we respectfully request a positive recommendation from you on this special use application. Thank you.
Thank you. You wanna go through the- I think Mr. Dick is going to go through the list of anyone that presented testimony as they wants to do a closing statement can for 3 minutes. So he's going to call names off. You just ask Sarah, say if you want to or not.
Don Hanslow,
I don't have any questions at this time.
This will be for a closing statement.
I don't believe I have a closing statement at this time. I think most of my concerns have been addressed.
Thank you.
Kevin D. And I'm going to mispronounce this name, Caitlin DeKeer Skeeter. Caitlin, are you there? Phil Rouse.
I don't have a closing statement. Thank you.
Rain Abu Shernab. David Flesh. Shannon Brooks. D. Stello.
I'm here. I think our closing statement is my husband Steve and I respectfully disagree that it meets all of the standards, in that it is detrimental to the enjoyment of our environment and vicinity of our environment, which we currently have right now.
Is that all you'd like to say?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Tim Killian. Bruce Eel.
Yes, present.
Did you have a comment to make in closing?
Simple comment is suggest the board do due diligence in reviewing the proposal in terms of the future, the long-term future of the project. Thank you.
Thank you.
Carolyn Taylor.
Hi.
You can go ahead.
Okay. Forgive me for speaking fast. I've got probably 10 minutes worth of here. I'm going to try to get what I can in 3 minutes. And I'd like to start with a bit more about what I said last night about the richness of McLean County soil and its many blessings. I'm reading to get through this, by the way. I'm not speaking spontaneously. McLean County soil and its many blessings for farming. The fact that this and much of Illinois was once under sea and then a glacier has apparently left unique treasures beneath and in our soil. And the Mahomet Sole Source Aquifer area passes under the eastern part of Bellflower Township, where some turbines are slated. The aquifer that provides 100 million gallons a day for Illinoisans to drink and use. Is there any concern for impact of so much drilling and deep concrete in that area? I don't know. Has an independent geologist or hydrologist been hired to assess any land use risks or cautions? Or the Mahomet Aquifer Consortium been consulted? I would hope so. What I do know from experience is that we here in McLean County have realized a phenomenal capacity for bumper crops of corn and beans, exceeding national averages by a lot. It's a patrimony, a legacy given by nature that is precious and exceptional. I don't know, maybe some farmers who've opted for wind energy elsewhere in other states or other places aren't as blessed with land that is so capable of such richness. In the spirit of Simeon Henry West, as I said last night, my great-grandfather, and if you've been to West Park, you know it symbolizes the priority he gave to preserving legacies like forested land. I think maybe I'm channeling my great-grandfather here, and by the way, he believed in channeling. But I think the pitch made to McLean County is that it also has special wind. The younger speakers last night from Normal were supportive largely in seeing wind energy as the wave of the future. And it is a wave of the future, for which I'm all for. But does it have to be a future that sours the quality of life through things like noise and shadow flicker, and also competes with farmland and farm tasks as a priority, taking away productive chunks of farmland for access roads as well as turbines, which we've seen can and do wind up lying on the ground after struck by lightning or being decommissioned and have no fitting burial place on the ground after after that? And how do we keep treasuring our past? As the woman in Normal who lived 2 miles from a wind project asked by Tim Jolly said, she'd never been within half a mile of a wind turbine to know what it was like for those who live, and I'll add work as farmers, having to be right up next to them to cultivate, plant, and harvest their fields, our fields. I have 400 acres, which both is and isn't a lot. If I add in my cousin's own land to the land of mine that they farm, it's a total of 720 acres. By big ag standards, it's a blip. And that's related to one of my numerous concerns that rise to the levels of worries that I have. Corporations tend to do corporate think, and in that sense, all corporations are kindred spirits. I saw that Invenergy has a pattern, as in Blooming Grove, where they sold 90% ownership to WEC, the Wisconsin Energy Corp, which is one of the S&P 500 on the New York Stock Exchange. They become partners, Invenergy and WEC. And as mentioned last night here about another Invenergy.
We're past the 3 minutes threshold. If you
Oh, you're kidding.
Kind of get it
Oh my
closed
gosh.
up, please.
I just wanted to say I'd rather pay property tax increase. I paid $15,000 a year. A $10,000 increase would provide the school money that is otherwise coming from here. I'd rather see that. I was going to say much more. Sorry, 3 minutes is too short.
Thank you very much.
This is Tim Jolly. I'd like to object to this procedure in that if Mr. Griffith gets an additional amount of time to give his case, I believe it's only fitting that we get at least the equal time since we were in.
The rules are already set.
But where do those rules come from?
You can do an objection if you want to, but that's the way it's going to be tonight.
I'm asking, where do the rules come from?
The bylaws of the Zoning Board of Appeals and the interpretation by the chair.
Do you have those in writing?
The zoning bylaws are in writing.
Because we are taxpayers. We're paying for your guys' seats where you're sitting in this meeting where it's being held. I think it's only fitting that we at least be able to have fair time. I strongly object, and I want that on record.
Catherine Metzger.
I would like to commend the Invenergy for agreeing to put in a hotline and provide a lot of details on that hotline. But there is a piece that's missing on that, and that is what will happen if the service level of 72 hours has not been met. We need to have some type of penalty assessed for those situations, just to encourage good behavior on the part of Invenergy, because obviously they haven't been able to follow the township road agreements. The counsel for the wind company also said that the county road agreement is being very diligently reviewed, but that has very little influence on the township roads. And the township roads are the primary roads that are in any of the project areas. We absolutely need to tie the township road agreements to continuation of the building permits. If they do not meet those road agreements for the township, not the county, but the township, then buildings must stop until that happens. They wouldn't have $150,000 fine or violations if they would have been following it. They would have had nothing, and they chose not to follow it. Lastly, I just want to say that why would we rush this decision? There is no one on this zoning board or on the staff that has any expertise to review and analyze the studies and models for the sound and the flicker. I recommend that the county find an independent consultant to review this and then ensure that the accuracy of these studies, so to, again, make sure that what has been presented is accurate, because we don't know that. And I want to thank you all. I know this is a very difficult process and long, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ed Peterson.
Name, address, all that. I have voiced my opinion on how all the data that was presented here is provided by people that are paid by Invenergy. Okay? For the board to really serve the public properly, I feel they need to have another look at all the data. And the fact that this area of McLean County doesn't have wind turbines is the reason I like that area. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Gary Tipsword. Anna Ziegler. That's all I have. Tim Jolly.
Thank you. Try to make this brief because I was expecting a little more time. We've been given time before. Are we really here discussing, why are we really here discussing this project? Is it the environment or is it really money? It's for the environment. First of all, they're under 30% efficient. They come in to grind up the roads that have been there since the 1930s and 40s. They put more rock on the roads, parades of semis and leveling equipment, dig massive holes for a foundation, bring in massive cranes that smash things like tiles and roads, several semis of rebar per tower, 78 to 90 trucks of concrete per tower, sections of tower, blades, narcells, etc. Traffic 24/7. It kills wildlife. That I don't think is very environmental. It's all about the money, and that's what it boils down to. The landowners sell their soul to get money just to put one on their land. The county sells their soul just to put money in their coffer, but they need to learn how to spend the money before they get more. The state of Illinois does the same thing. And it's all been, majority of it, as testified, is being paid by taxpayers. As far as the companies themselves, we have a lot of experience with Invenergy. And believe me, they have not been compliant to pass permits. They need to be held accountable. Also, with the people that are non-participants in the area, they need to be given relief for riding dirt, just filthy roads, washing cars, tearing up the suspensions on cars, actually just tearing your car completely up, dust blowing in the houses. They did not comply. All they were doing is watering in front of the house, was not watering the entire road. They need to be shut down instantly if they're not in compliance. They have a phone number now that I've talked to in the past, and all I've been told by them is that we're working on that, Mr. Jolly, and they never do. So they have a phone number and it didn't work before. Does this meet the standards that the zoning board asked to be with compliance of? Number one, I'd say public safety is not complied to. It's not complied to in the past, and I don't anticipate it changing in anything in the future. You need to have independent, non-biased, actual sound readings, actual readings of things that have happened, not models. And I don't care how you compare them, there was no evidence shown of an actual reading from somebody's residence. The family farm that I live on has been in our family since Abraham Lincoln was alive. I'm near and dear to this land. And I've seen it raped and tore up. And that makes me sad, and I feel for the people down in that part of the county, that they will have to live through what we did. I want you to remember that, because none of you live around them, nor do you probably anticipate moving next to one. And I don't care if you've gone out and sat a half hour by one and thought that it was just fine. It's not. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Jolly. I think that's everyone that's eligible for a closing statement. At this time, I think we're going to go, there are some questions from board members that we'd like to address before we close the meeting. Because once we close the meeting, we can't ask Phil questions, we can't ask the applicant questions. So if you got questions to be asked, we need to ask them right now. And we'll see if we can get them addressed before we close the meeting. So Drake, I think you had a question.
Yes, the big question here is that we've heard that there are a variety of road agreements that are out there, and usually we stipulate that a condition of getting a permit is that they worked out a road agreement. We've heard testimony that the roads are still torn up and that there's some issues around the road agreements. How would the zoning board staff want us to proceed, who do we talk with about this? Is this with the county engineer who's been there the whole time, or what? In order to make sure that we don't have any of these issues around the roads, or if they come up, they get resolved easily.
Do you want to address that question to any particular person like Mr. Hula?
I was thinking about addressing it to the county engineer who's there, I believe.
That's who, I think that's who we're talking about. So,
Okay, yeah.
we're
And-
gonna,
oh,
we're gonna
that'd be
swear
Luke.
you in, if that's all right.
Yeah.
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you give in this case now and hearing will be the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
All right.
Thanks, Luke.
Would you
So
give us
these
your name
road
and
use
address for the record?
agreements, we are, let's see, Mr. Stokes and I are currently going through, right now with the road use agreement for the Sapphire Wind project. And we are doing definitely a lessons learned from the last few wind farms that have been built last couple of years on several things that need to be addressed. So we are taking the time to go through that right now.
Luke, would you please give your name and spell your name and address for the court reporter, please?
Yes. It is Luke Hohulin, and that is Hohulin. And my address is 306 Heather Drive in Hayworth, Illinois, 61745.
We're ready, Luke. Speak slowly if you could.
Okay. So, like I was saying, we are going through the road use agreements right now, in negotiation process, and we are addressing several of the concerns that have been brought up during these meetings and that have been concerns from the county highway department. So we are trying to address them on the early side, and it is a lessons learned process. Some issues that we did not have during the Brightstalk Wind Farm, we had during the Bloom and Grove Wind Farm construction. So each one of these is a unique character to address, really.
Okay. What we're trying to do is make sure that we're not causing any problems so that we get in front of them. So if the roads are torn up, we assume on the board that the agreement's been reached with the road commissioner, that the road is going to be replaced before the road commissioner probably would sign off, and therefore the permits would not be issued until the road commissioner signs off. I think that's the process. May I get confirmation of that?
So the developer pulverizes the roads for construction purposes, and then they are left gravel during construction. They are put back during the post-construction phase. So after the windmills have been erected, then they are replaced back to an oil and chip surface or a paved surface, depending on what the original condition was.
Okay. And so you got to tear up the roads in order to get the trucks across it, I take it. And then they replace the roads. So is there a requirement that the roads are put back in as good or better condition than they started?
Yes. Yes. So a lot of the destruction of the roads occurs due to the fact that the roads cannot handle the repetitive trucks that go. So they need to build up the structure of especially the township roads. So they pulverize them and typically add gravel. And then once they do that, during the post-construction phase, then we go back in and put it back to an oil and chip road, which would typically be better than what was there because we can address slope issues. And then with the additional gravel, it has a better foundation than what it had before. So,
Okay.
and the road commissioners do have to sign off on the roads prior to the post-construction contractor before they oil and chip.
Okay. So the next question, the other main question I have is that we've heard testimony that some of the trucks going over the ground have disrupted tiling, and that the tiles will then be broken later. And in one case, somebody testified that there's mud backing up into their house. What is the mechanism that the companies have to repair whatever tile damage that might have been done? Often the tile damage doesn't show up until months or even years later. So it's a little different trajectory for doing that. So this might be more towards Phil, or Phil, who would you have us address that question to?
I guess I can speak a little bit to the tile. I know during both the Brightstock Wind Farm and the Bloom and Grove Wind Farm, the developers had a tiling company follow like the cable contractor. And so as they were trenching in through the fields, whenever they came across the tile, they repaired it behind the cable contractor. I can't speak to whether or not they fixed everyone. But that was kind of the process that was happening. They actually had a tile contractor follow the cable contractor during that operation of construction.
Okay. Have you, on these other farms and with this much larger set of experiences, have you had follow-on problems where the tiles don't get repaired sufficiently, where there's an additional problem later?
I have not been made aware of any of those situations, but if it's not directly related to the county highway, it'd probably go through the road commissioner. And
Okay.
we might not be made aware of those.
Okay. Yeah, we hope that they repair it and it's good, but I was wanting to, if you haven't heard about it, that's possibly a good sign, or it's a better sign than nothing, I suppose. So those were my main questions. I feel like I want to make sure we're not doing irreparable damage to the communities and the land.
Mr. O'Hulan, do you have the township involved in your discussion with the road agreements?
So I have reached out to the road commissioners. So typically the negotiations are separate. We use the state's attorney's office to help with negotiation for the county roads. And then the townships have their own counsel. And then we are in direct communication with the townships as far as if they have engineering questions or anything that we can help assist them on during the negotiation process.
Would the road agreement that you're working on now involve watering the White Rock so to keep the dust down, or using some kind of a agent that would help?
Yes, that is one of the items that we are trying to address in this road use agreement.
Thank you.
Who makes the decision? I mean, first of all, in repairing the roads, is it county personnel that is actually doing the road work, even though it's a township road? Or who actually does the work to repair the road?
So the decisions for the repair, pardon?
I guess, this is Ruth Novosad, and I guess this is for Mr. O'Hulan.
So the first part of the question, the road commissioners during the negotiation process of the road use agreement put together what they want for the proposed post-construction improvements. So typically it's oil and chip and 3 layers called an A3, and then a subsequent oil and chip layer on year 2 post-construction and then year 3. And then that is actually, at the county put together the proposal documents for the post-construction work and then do our normal county bidding process to bid the work out. So contractors who do that oil and chip work can bid on that construction project.
So the responsibility to get, to coordinate and get the bids, and it's not necessarily Invenergy, it's the township and the county kind of take over that responsibility and facilitate those repairs. Is that correct? And they just sort of bill the Invenergy?
With the way these 2 previous road agreements have been with Bloom and Grove and Brightstalk Wind Farm, yes. They, the developer pretty much finances the post-construction project, and then the county and the townships work together to put it out for bid and to oversee the construction.
Because I'm trying to, I can't quite understand why the roads have not been repaired and brought back to a pre-construction condition if the county and the townships are involved in that work, and they're just, they facilitate the work and Invenergy pays, or the developer pays. Do you understand my question?
I believe so. So part of that is the contractor schedule. Once we bid out the work, typically we have completion dates on our projects. And so the contractor fits in the work, as their schedule allows. And I know right now they've been doing oil and chip work for the Bennett Construction has the oil and chip work for the north half of the county for the township side of the MFT, motor fuel tax program. And so they've been doing that. They also have the Brightstalk A1, the oil and chip for the post-construction wind farm work. And then they also have the Bloom and Grove. So on their behalf, there's a lot of moving parts there, and that's just work within our county. They also have work in other counties too. So we are kind of at the leniency of their schedule when it comes to construction. So if they fit the work in by our completion date, everything is acceptable to us. I don't know if there's a different way to speed this up as far as making the roads better, especially during the first year of post-construction work, because the way we've set up on the township side is they repulverize the roads, and then they do the 3 layers of oil and chip, and that process just takes some time to do, especially with the footprint being over 40 miles of township roads.
Did I hear it correctly that, have the roads, and so a lot of the work has not been done just because of timing and getting the necessary bids and what have you. But has there ever been a situation where Invenergy has not, or the roads have not been completely finished the way they're supposed to, with the exception of roads that are currently being worked on?
During which phase of the project? During construction of the
post-construction,
windmills?
yeah.
Okay, so during the construction of the project, there were times where we did not have a quick turnaround to address certain safety issues, drop-offs on the edge of the roads, and certain things in that manner. And like I said earlier, we're trying to address those in the current road use agreement. But there were times where the turnaround on Invenergy side was not impressive.
Okay. Is there, do you require a performance bond or money up front from Invenergy? Is that part of the road use agreement, so that they're required, we have their money. If they choose not to cooperate, we can just go ahead and make those repairs.
In the past, there's been forms of letters of credit or escrow accounts, yes.
And that's part of that would be part of the road use agreement going forward.
The current one
For
under
this project?
negotiation, we're still working on that, but yes, we'll put in some sort of financial responsibility like that.
Okay. And one of the witnesses or one of the presenters mentioned that there's one road that there's actually gravel in the, I'm not sure I understood it correctly, but there's actual gravel in the ditch so that it doesn't drain properly. And when it rains, there's water on the road. Are you familiar with that situation, or?
I don't recall an exact location on that, but I know from past experience on the Brightstock wind farm, we had issues to where when the developer added rock to the road with all the truck traffic, it pushed the rock out and, went, in some circumstances, went almost from the flow line at one ditch to the flow line of another.
Okay.
And then we addressed that in the post-construction improvements. So we had the contractor of the post-construction remove that and then put in 6 inches of dirt on the front slope of the road.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Huhuen.
This is Mike Kurtz.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to ask if you have any language or in the new language, if there's anything for policing these misuses or I'm searching for the wrong word. I don't know what I'm trying to say other than policing to make sure that they're performing, that they're taking and blading the roads when they get big ruts in them and those type of issues, and that we have some mechanism where we can shut construction down if they're not complying within the 72 hours.
On the first part of that, we are looking at doing some violation fines for non-compliance. And then on the second part, I would have to defer to kind of the state's attorney's office for the authority to shut down the project.
And that would be a
Okay,
question.
so that's what we need.
Yeah, I think we need maybe a state's attorney or, is there legal language that we can put in that the wind farm would not become operational, or we could shut it down if remedies are not taken care of.
This is Samantha Vasquez.
This counsel from the
Hi. So as Mr. Huhuen has stated, we are still in the process of drafting this document. It is fairly lengthy. If that is something that the ZBA really recommends to put in there, we can put that in or add that to the negotiation process. But at this point in time, there's nothing finalized for the current agreement.
Does this board have that authority to make this happen? I mean, do we have the authority to stop their contract or stop their construction?
Once that contract is finalized, I don't think this board has the authority to do anything. I think that we could take your suggestions into account during the negotiation phase. But once this contract is finalized, it can be enforced by the state's attorney's office at that time if need be.
So the state's attorney's office is assisting with this agreement, but it seems to me like it's even at a higher level than just the road use agreement. I mean, I think that we've heard various comments from concerned citizens that there's no recourse, that, you know, Invenergy just kind of walks away. They've already sold projects, and I know that the contracts inure to the new owner, but enforcement is a key issue here. So how do we ensure that the contract is enforceable? And is that, I don't think that's the zoning board's responsibility, but I think that's a missing piece.
From my understanding, and Ms. Vasquez can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that these road use agreements carry forward to, if Invenergy decides to sell the project, it would carry on to the new owner. And so whatever is agreed upon would go forward to the new owner.
But I think we're questioning language. How would you, and probably this is a question for the state's attorney's office, how would you structure an agreement that if they did not respond to telephone calls in 72 hours, if they did not repair the roads correctly, that the project could stop? I mean, the wind energy farm would cease operation.
So if we were to add some provision like that, we would take it under the normal negotiation process, present it to Invenergy. Once we have an agreement between us, then we would make a recommendation to the proper committee and the proper board first. So that's the oversight process for that language. At this time, we can't present you with any language because the negotiations aren't finished. We don't have any authority to enter into the agreement and that's the board. We just try to negotiate as best we can and make a recommendation, and we can take your recommendations as to provisions that you would like to see during this process.
Well, and I think that's what we're struggling with, that, you know, we're charged with approving a special use permit, and on the surface that might be a reasonable thing to do. But if there isn't a viable road use agreement, and if there isn't a viable enforcement agreement in place, then, you know, maybe approving a special use permit is not appropriate. So, I mean, there's kind of a catch-22 there.
This is Julia Turner. Mr. Hohulian, have you ever felt the need for the ability to shut down a project due to road issues?
To shut down the whole project, no. I think one of the biggest issues we ran into last year during the Blooming Grove Wind Farm was the contractor and the developer added rock to the road, and it was in the plans for the developer to put a dirt wedge on the side of the road to hold in that rock and to prevent a drop off. And the time it took to get that dirt installed was unreasonable. And so that became a safety concern, and we are trying to address that in the current road use agreement negotiations.
So currently your recourse would be to shut down the road. If it's a safety issue, you have that within your, obviously no one can take that away from you. You guys can shut down a road if it's not safe.
That is correct. And that goes for the township roads as well. They have authority to, if it's deemed hazardous to the traveling public, they could close the road.
Does the zoning office on any project, not just this wind farm, if we find someone, if Phil finds someone that's in violation of provisions of the special use or permit, do they currently have the right to shut down their project?
We really don't have the authority to shut down a project unless they've presented us with something to get the permit that was untrue or illegal. We have a much better opportunity to work with the township road commissioners if the road commissioners work out a reasonable road use agreement and have their own stop work order to do with that. For example, there was that jump bridge that Mr. Killian was talking about, 2700 North Road. That road could have very easily been shut to concrete trucks, which is what was needed to be done to stop that problem. But I think that Mr. Hohulen is working with the township road commissioners to have such a road use agreement that holds up on itself rather than on us to close the project down because a road commissioner tells us we need to do that. It just puts us in a terrible situation. We don't know whether or not this is a reasonable thing to do that this road commissioner is doing or not. We don't know that the $170,000 that he's charging the developer is correct or not. It's just not part of our review process, and it opens us up to legal liability that may be very difficult for us to defend.
This is Julia Turner. In addition to that, I think we all need to think about, or I guess I should ask this assistant state's attorney, what's the likelihood that someone you're negotiating with would agree to a clause like that?
I suppose that's impossible to say. We don't have any current contracts that I can think of that make us, that name us as a third-party beneficiary to someone else's contract. And that's basically what this kind of, what that would lead to. And in any department, I can't think of any contract that would do that would be the case.
I'm hearing you say that it's unlikely that that the county would, well, it would be a difficult thing to negotiate and to get through and to work with as legal counsel.
So to be a third-party beneficiary, we would have to basically insert ourselves in someone else's contract, as opposed to their coming into our contract. We can put whatever we need to put in our own, but we're not really involved in the other parties. And to my knowledge, we haven't been invited to be involved. And if we were, then that would be something that a little bit above me would decide if that's possible. And I mean that to say the elected members would have to make that decision.
So how
Mr.
does
Chairman,
the
am
city
I
of Bloomington
permitted
or
to
the town of Normal?
add anything to this discussion?
You want to add something to it, you say? Or nobody's asked you a question yet?
I'll ask, what's the likelihood that you would be part of something like that?
And that does relate to my comment. The county does have inherent authority to issue stop work orders when construction is being done improperly or not within the requirements of a permit. So the county does have that authority to issue stop work orders, and I'm sure they have in the past on different types of construction. So that is an inherent authority the county has in its possession.
I'm gonna jump in here. Brian Banger, Mr. Hulen, are we missing anything when it comes to the roads in general? Like, is there a better way to route these roads where we could condition the roads ahead of construction instead of after construction? I realize we're not comparing apples to apples here when I say that when a gravel pit is seeking to be or seeking a permit to start, they have to have a suitable road to use before they can operate. Is there any merit to that type of discussion? Do you feel? Another piece to this, and I don't want to forget this, so I'll come back to it later, is are we missing a piece when it comes to decommissioning? Because we have to have this heavy traffic over these roads again. So let me come back to that. Answer the first part if you can at first.
So the White Oak Wind Farm, that one, the roads were paved before construction of the wind farm was being built. So it is possible, but that is kind of the approach and an agreement of the road use agreement between the county, townships, and the developer. Furthermore, it also depends on what is called the traffic or transportation impact analysis. And that's where an engineering firm goes out and looks at all these roads and then runs analysis based on the projected number of aggregate trucks and concrete trucks that are going to be on there, as well as the components, and then what they need structurally for those roads. And then they do estimates on whether or not to upgrade the roads kind of pre-construction or post-construction. So there's a couple of different approaches. It really depends on, I would say, kind of where the locations of the turbines are. And I mean, these larger turbines, you do have less of them. So there's potentially less roads being utilized. However, you'll have typically more concrete trucks for a bigger foundation. So, you know, the loads are kind of separated that way. But there are two different approaches that can be utilized if you know, the developer and the county and townships kind of agree to that.
Okay, so what I'm hearing there is it is possible, but depends upon a lot of variables. So the other part to this is the decommissioning. We've seen decommissioning costs related to these projects. Do any of these decommissioning costs reflect what damage might be done to the roads during decommissioning?
Give me just a second. So, I want to say that the road repairs, and we've already had correspondence, and Mr. Dick has been made aware of this, that some of the decommissioning costs were a little light on the road repairs for the decommissioning costs. However, it was, we were informed that there is a section in the decommissioning clause that states that the repair or the cost will be reflected kind of, I think it was every 5 years, or, you know, there's an interval of time that they're looked at for price comparison. So I believe that's been taken care of.
Okay, and maybe one that I should have put in the middle of this questioning is during a repair, I'm assuming you have to issue permits for cranes to replace blades, the nacelles, things like that. Those trucks are typically a lot heavier. So are permits issued and do they handle repairs as ongoing, or how does that handled?
So once the wind farm is in operation, then the permits for a crane or, if a blade gets damaged and needs to be replaced, then those actually are paid on an annual basis. So we use a third-party permitting system. And so they have to fill the permit out online, submit it to us, and then we would keep track of those loads throughout the year and then bill the wind farm on an annual basis for those permits. So that is accounted for.
Okay, thank you.
You mentioned on the White Oaks that was done differently. How did that turn out? Did the roads hold up?
Yes and no. So one of the problems with paving oil and chip roads is the edges typically on an oil and chip road tend to shift over onto the shoulder. And so when you pave on top of that, you don't typically have your full road base. And so we did encounter some shoulder or edge cracking during construction and even post-construction, just on under regular traffic.
So in other words,
One
you
other
would
thing
not,
I'd like to mention for that is hot mix. So that was all those roads on White Oak, I believe, were paved in hot mix. I don't recall the thickness, but hot mix roads are typically more expensive to maintain than oil and chip. And so it does become more of a financial burden on the townships to maintain them as hot mix. So some of the some of the roads have been seal coated with oil and chip just to seal them up for pavement preservation.
so in your opinion, you would not recommend doing it that way, or you have an opinion? I mean, I'm not talking about the hot mix over the oil and chip, I understand that, but I just mean if you're doing the roads, doing the whole road beforehand or wait until later.
I guess there's benefits to both. One of the benefits to waiting to do the road improvements post the wind farm being constructed is if there's any soft spots in the road, those can be addressed prior to the post-construction improvements. If you, for instance, pave over an oil and chip road and you have a soft spot, then you'll repair it with a hot mix patch. And so you'll have joints in your pavement, and that's just more cracks in the road. So there are benefits to both, but I really don't have a personal preference.
It would seem like it would solve your dust problem. That's all I'm looking at.
Yes, we have had multiple discussions on that as well. And again, we can propose that within the road use agreement, but the developer has to agree to do the pre-construction improvements. Because on their end, they're looking at costs. So if it costs more to do the pre-construction improvements than the post-construction, that's kind of how they approach it. But it's an ongoing negotiation right now.
If you do it the other way and it's just a white rock, what's your proposal to take care of the dust?
There are different additives that we have used as dust suppressants that can be used. And so we're proposing to use certain ones that the county that ourselves have used to handle dust. as far as that goes. And then during the post-construction work, the roads would be pulverized again to mix that material up, and then oil and chip on top of it.
But during construction, you have something better than water?
Yes.
How long does that last?
It depends on which product. Calcium chloride is one that would last quite a long time. And so it may only have to be applied 2 or 3 times during construction. And then there's some other products that we actually utilized during the Bloom and Grove wind farm that had to be applied approximately every 5 to 6 weeks. And that was dependent on traffic, because it would suppress the dust enough, but it would wear off based on traffic. And it was a biodegradable product. So between the traffic and the weather, it would have to be reapplied.
This is Julia Turner. I'd like to move on from this topic in that I feel that we're in pretty good hands with the expertise. I'm not sure I can add any major expertise to this, unless we're all looking at putting something in as a suggestion, or I don't even, and I guess this is a question for the state's attorney. I mean, can we do any more than suggest? We can't mandate that the road agreement contain a certain product or a certain order, can we? Or maybe we can, I don't know.
Strictly speaking, the contract would be approved through the county board. So if something were to be unapproved, it would get rejected there. But that doesn't mean that your suggestion won't be taken. It won't be taken. I'm just saying, strictly speaking, that's where the authority lies.
Sure, I understand. That's a very good point. I appreciate your clarifying that. Everything we do is a suggestion.
So did everybody get their questions answered from Mr. Hohulian?
I did.
Okay. Were there any other questions from board members before we close the meeting?
Well, I'm not sure who to address this to, maybe to Phil, or is there a county engineer? But there seems to be a disconnect. We've heard repeatedly that the shadow flicker and the sound studies have been done, and they've been done by Invenergy, and Invenergy has hired the experts and done the studies, and the studies are acceptable. But the disconnect that I see is that the people that actually live among the wind farms complain about shadow flicker and noise. So is there anything that we can do to independently ensure that the shadow flicker and the noise guidelines are met? We kind of talked about putting a meter on each residence, and are those viable options, or do we need to do an independent study? And like I say, I'm not sure who I'm addressing that question to.
That was Ruth Novosad, in case you didn't know.
Sorry, Ruth.
This is Luke again, Hohulian. We at the highway department do not have that expertise, so there would have to be some sort of independent study to be done to gather that information if the board so chose.
I think that to a large extent, that's why we bring these, or Invenergy brings these experts here so that we can ask them questions. I don't know that they're dishonest. I believe they are not dishonest. I think they're professionals and they give us accurate information, and they've done accurate testing. They could lose their certifications if they aren't. I don't think it's appropriate for us to hire a sound expert or a property value expert to review their studies. I think that you asking questions of them at this meeting, if you have any concerns that they're not telling the truth, if you think that they should do more studies, for example, with Blooming Grove and Brightstock, they're in the process of doing the studies of these turbines now, and they're in touch with some of the property owners and putting out their testing materials. But I don't think that Invenergy is paying these folks not to do their job properly, and if you suspect that that's the case, then let me know and we will follow up on it. But I believe they're honest professionals.
And I would agree, but I can't overlook that. And we kind of talked about, there are people that if they're opposed to the wind energy turbines, then they're going to come up with negative anecdotes. But there does seem to be people that truly are impacted by the noise and by shadow flicker. And I guess I have a hard time reconciling the studies that have been done with actual people that are coming forward to say these are problems that we're experiencing. So
Ruth, the thing I try to keep in mind is that anyone's allowed to pay for a study.
Yeah, Ruth, Brian Bangert, I happen to agree with your sentiment because I feel better myself looking at data when I've come across a third-party certification. I mean, it's just a lot of professionals have to go through third-party certifications before they do anything to prove who they are. I will note that in the past we have had discussions about houses that seem to be completely surrounded by these wind towers, and we have in the past also recommended that those towers be pushed back even further for non-participating. And looking at these maps, there's a lot more non-participating than participating, but they have options, I believe. I mean, it's a big world out there. There are options. So I think that's where we can kind of come in to help out. There's ways around this to help these people. My 2 cents.
Anybody else have a question they want answered? I don't see anybody, so we're at the point where we're going to close it to public, and I'm not sure if we want to deliberate on the case tonight. I was thinking if it would have been 9 o'clock, give us an hour, but we can't get done deliberating this case in 30 minutes. So I would suggest getting another date, and we'll just do deliberation. But whatever you guys want to do.
I would concur with that, Chairman.
So would I, and maybe by that time, maybe the road agreements will be negotiated and we could see what some of those are too, so.
Well, my schedule, I can't do anything next week. I'm gonna be gone. So it'll be, Bill's got a date, I think. So it's gonna be the week of the, I guess we shoot for the 15th, is that right? No, 22nd.
July 6th is the next regularly scheduled meeting, but if you wanted to have a special meeting to discuss this, since the chairman's gone the week of the 14th, what day, and this room is available the 21st, 22nd, and 23rd, and 24th, which is Monday through Thursday. Tuesday would be the 22nd. This room is available at that time. Question is are you available?
I'm available on that date, Julia Turner.
Yep, and this is Rick Dean, and I'm available on that date. Do you have a really big agenda on the 6th, Phil?
We don't have anything on the agenda yet. The deadline is next Monday. But this way.
Okay, we probably, yep.
Well,
This is Mike Kurtz. I'm available on the 22nd.
I guess. the
And
way I
I'm
look at it,
available.
If we could do it on the 22nd, we get this part, if we can get it done one night, which I think we probably can, even if we don't have anything scheduled for the 6th, it's just one day, so it's either the 22nd or the 6th. If we can do it on the 22nd, everybody's available, let's try for that.
I'm available.
Let me just read your names and you say yes or no, okay, please? Brian Bangert,
Yes.
Michael Kurtz,
Yes.
Rick Dean,
Yes.
Julia Turner,
Yes.
Ruth Novosad,
Yes.
Jim Finnegan.
Yes. So if everybody's in agreement on that. I
And
think we're
Drake
gonna-
Zimmerman, I'm
Sorry,
available
Drake.
too. That's okay, I still love you.
Drake. Well, if we could
Yes.
see you, we'd know you're there.
Ah. Oh,
At that
that's
point,
my
at this
public
point, I think we're
service.
going to,
Do you want to meet in person?
yeah, this is a question, do you want to come in person? Because this is important, and not that we don't see you, but I think there's no reason why you couldn't come unless you decide you're not comfortable with that. But I think we could discuss the case a lot better if we were all looking at each other.
I agree, Chairman. This is Julia Turner.
Mike Kurtz agrees.
All right.
I would agree. Ruth Novosad agrees.
Drake
that
Zimmerman
would-
works.
Yeah, that'd be fine with Rick too.
All right, we'll just meet in person, and I think, I think I'd feel a lot better about it. I think everybody would. So we're going to reconvene, we're gonna recess and then reconvene at 7 o'clock on the 22nd of June in this room. Do we need a vote for that? We didn't have a vote last night. Okay, I think we're set to go.
Mr. Chairman, it's Julia Turner. Just to clarify for our audience, even though we'll be in person, it will still be shown virtually, correct?
Yes. And I don't know how many people.
And
we
just
handle
for our
that.
audience,
We don't turn anybody away.
we've
hopefully.
It would be on YouTube.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be on, we wouldn't do a link because we have no participation that way.
The other thing is that people at that junction aren't going to be able to add any information. It
That's
is
correct.
just the board discussing things.
As long as we don't reopen the meeting, which I don't intend to do. That's why we did this question tonight and try and get our questions answered. And you understand, we can't ask Phil questions. We can talk amongst us and unless we all decide that we want to open a meeting, but that changes everything.
Yeah.
So,
So your intention is not to reopen the meeting.
that's correct.
That we wanted to make sure that the people listening and watching and participating are not showing up thinking that they can add a lot of information, add any information.
The meeting part is closed.
Right. That's just what I wanted to underline.
Very good job.
And just, one more little comment, there was a brief mention that if we met, then we would have more information about the road use agreements. But that really isn't appropriate to talk about or present since the meeting is closed, correct?
This is what you can do. I've already asked my counsel. We can open the meeting up for one particular thing. So if we have a question and we don't think we've got it answered, we can open the meeting up. If we can only talk about the thing that we open it up for. So if you have a question that you don't feel like you've got answered, we can do something about it. But
okay,
let's just deal with it as it comes.
Okay.
All right, thanks for everybody for coming.